Hi, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you want to learn how to do advanced output mapping in Resolume, and that's what I'm here to show you today. No intros, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so in front of me, I have Resolume. I have my output advanced map, completely brand new, nothing in it. Also brand new, fresh Resolume composition with nothing in it. I just dropped a couple layers, but it's basically what you get out of the box. And I also have a copy of the pixel map that I made for the nightclub that I work at pretty regularly. And I figure we would go based off of that and use that as our template here. So let's get started. So first of all, let's zoom in here. We can see that our output size is 1024 by 768. I'm gonna click here in the width box at the top right and type in our first half of the size here, which is 1024. And notice what happens when I hit tab. It automatically bumps us out for some reason. So when that happens, what you'll have to do is just click in the next box and you can type in the next number. So 768, enter. So that is now our virtual output size, right? Now, because we're on the input selection, nothing has changed. And the reason for that is because our composition is 1920 by 1080. That's what I have it set to. So let's flip over to our output transformation because this is really where we're gonna be making changes. And you can see here that the size now is completely different, right? It doesn't match to it. So let's take our first slice here. Let's start with our rear one. And we're gonna click on this slice. Doesn't matter where it is or what the size is or anything right now. So click on it. And we can just start typing in numbers to tell Resolume what we want. So for this, we can just sort of read it left to right, top to bottom. So when you enter numbers in Resolume, if you just start typing them in, it will automatically know where to place them. So I'm gonna type in 0 for my top, for my left coordinate. So 0, and then I hit space, and you can see it automatically puts an L and a T there. So 0, and then I'll type in 64, space again. Now, it wants the width and the height at this point. So I'm gonna type in 128 for our width, and then space 128 for our height, enter, boom. So it places it exactly where we want it, which is fantastic. Now I am gonna name this real quick, rear. It's really good practice to name these things, especially once you start using slice transform later. That's gonna help a lot. So we're gonna call that rear. I'll hit Control D to duplicate it. The name is wrong, doesn't matter. So let's move on to our column here, and we'll just do these left to right. So once again, I'm gonna use Resolume to just do all the calculations for me, place it where I need to. So 128 for our X value, 0 for our Y value, 32 for our width, and 192 for our height. Enter, boom, that's where we want it. Now the next three are easy because we already know where they're gonna go. But before I duplicate it, I'm just gonna call it column, and we'll call it column SR4, and that stands for stage right 4. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate that again here. Now it's automatically gonna go to 5, that's fine, we'll come back and fix that. So 5, 6, and there's 7. So let's rename 7 to 1, 6 to 2, and there we go. So now we have stage right 1, 2, 3, and 4, all across the way there, just the way it is on this pixel map. Let's scoot over and we'll do these guys. Now you can see in the pixel map here, I have this cutout of these six rectangles. And the reason that exists in this particular pixel map, and one of the reason that I chose it for this, is because it's a little weird. It's not just a rectangle. So if I show you a photo of what the nightclub actually looks like, you can see these are our main screens behind right here. And there's actually a gap cut out on either side for the DJ booth to fit in. So we have to account for that, but for now we can kind of ignore it and move on. So let's go back to our pixel map here. All right, cool. So let's just create this whole rectangle. We'll come back and we'll fix that later. So we can just duplicate the rear screen. That should be fine. We will call this SR main for stage right main. And then this is 256, 64, 224, 128. Again, I'm just reading off the numbers on the screen here, and I just happen to know that the way they're placed is in the order that I need. All right, great. So that's where I want it. Again, stage left is exactly the same, just moved across. So I'm gonna snap it right where it belongs. And we're gonna call this stage left main. Perfect. And then the last thing we have are columns. Again, we already have those done up. So I'm gonna copy our 1 and 2 here, Control CV, duplicate those guys, move them across, boom. And then I will probably also move them, they're fine where they are. Okay, so we'll just need to make sure we very carefully rename these stage left 1, stage left 2, and then 3 and 4. Now these got, we accidentally copied the wrong ones here. That's okay. So we're gonna call this stage right 1 and stage right 2. So just so you're following, all we've done so far is exactly copy the map as it's shown here with the numbers provided to us, and that's it. So that's great for our output. That's exactly what it's expecting, and it looks great. The problem now is when we go to the input selection. All of these slices are pulling from our entire composition. So I'll show you here. If I put up our test card, which is just output show test card, this is what Resolume is spitting out across the entire 1920 by 1080 size, right? Which is great. But if we go to the output transformation, you'll notice that every single slice is just taking that and it's stretching it to meet whatever the dimensions are, because that's literally what we did, is we're saying from the output slice, right? So for example, one of our columns here, we want this entire space taken and we want it squeezed into this size right here, this tiny little column. Not what you want. You don't want any stretching, always bad, almost always bad. So we're gonna try and fix that now. And the easiest way of doing that is to go to your input, select everything you got here. So I'm just clicking at the top, holding shift, clicking at the bottom, that selects everything. Right click, match output shape. Now it will automatically, you can see that the actual output didn't change at all, right? Because we're on our input selection. So what it's pulling from has not changed. What's changed is where those slices are taking that data from. So if we zoom in tight here, you can see all of our slices are here. They're a little hard to see. Let me turn this back off. Output show test card once again. So all of our slices here are here and it's pulling the way we want, which is great. Now, of course, the problem is when I show that and we go to our output side, that's not at all what we want. It's only taking from the top left corner. It's stretching it across the entire thing. Looks really bad. So here's what we're gonna do. So these two main screens, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna move them. In fact, I think I'm actually gonna size all this up because it's just too small. So what I'm gonna do is start to arrange these in a way that sort of matches the way it looks in real life. So I know that these are spaced out a little bit. So I'll take these and I'll just sort of arbitrarily space them to something that looks about right. That looks great. I'm gonna move this down to where I want it to be, which is approximately centered. Now I know that's not perfectly centered. We're gonna fix that. These guys here, these columns, I know that I would like them to be centered with the content here. So if I have content that's centered on this guy, I want it to also be centered on the columns just because it'll look a little bit better in my opinion. And I'll do something similar here. Now that is great. So let's do this. Let's take our rear, right? And let's move that to one of the corners here. And the reason I like to do that is because that will prevent anything I'm working with here from snapping to it. I do want Resolume to snap, so I don't want to turn off snapping completely, but I don't want this to be something it snaps to because it could throw off some positioning. So the first thing I want to do is take these two guys and let's get these snapped right to the center here. And you can see if I move this to the left, it's drawing this pink line with one vertex at the center and the other the center of the geometry I have. And if I move it up, it'll do the same thing. So it's as soon as you see those both disappear from that center location, that's how you know it's centered. So let's grab these side columns. We'll do something similar, throw them over here. These guys. Now, since these are they're our 1 and 2, just like the inside of this guy over here are 1 and 2, I want to keep those closer to the inside. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not super important in this case. I'm gonna take our rear now, and now I'm gonna go ahead and snap this dead center along the bottom. So I think that's a pretty good starting point. If you're just trying to get your feet off the ground, this is a good place to start. So let's try this now. If I put on some content, right? That content is shooting all the way across the screen, and if I go to our output transformation, it looks pretty good. Things, it sort of matches where you'd expect things to be in real life, which is great. This is a pretty good way of getting a basic sort of setup going. Now, one issue comes in when I trigger our logo layer here, right? So this is gonna just stretch across everything. So there's a couple things that we could do to tackle this. Let's say I wanna have this logo on both sides of the screen as well as on the rear, right? So one way to approach that would be to make a separate layer for each slice. And that's a good way to go if you want to be able to have separate content or show different layer logo content or whatever content on each of those 3 slices individually. But starting out like this, I think a simple way to go is actually just to have that same content be shown on all 3 of the screens. The easiest way of doing this was actually going to be our slice transform tool, which is a really important tool to know about, especially if you're using the newer version of Resolume where it's available. If you're in an older version of Resolume, I'll go over later about how we can work around that. So let's go to our effects here and let's grab our slice transform. And you can see it's right here. I'm gonna go ahead and drop it on our logo. And that has done nothing so far, absolutely nothing. So you can see that in our slice transform effect here, it's awaiting some slices. So let's go to our slices tab. If you don't see it, go to view, turn on slices right here, show slices, boom. And now this is why we named everything earlier. You can see everything you want. So I'm gonna go ahead and click rear and I'll hold control to select multiple and we'll grab SR and SL. So we're gonna take all 3 of these here, take those and drag them and drop them right into slices. Now, if they're red for a second, give it a second and it'll pick up. And you can see everything is positioned where we want it. We'll make some corrections to that, but so far so good. Worth noting, if you want to skip a step, you can actually, without even putting a slice transform, just grab whatever slices you want. So we'll go back to these, drag and drop onto your place, and it will automatically turn it into a slice transform, which is really handy if you're rushing a little bit. So this looks good. Maybe we scale this up a little bit now, right? Okay, but you see how we have some different sizes. That's kind of a problem. If you're in the new version of Resolume, which I think is 7.13, you can actually change the scaling for each of these. So scaling right now is set to fill. Maybe this one I'll put to fit for our rear, and you can see now it's gonna actually help that a little bit more. So I'll bring the scale down a little bit. That looks good. Maybe we'll throw a drop shadow on it so it can actually stand out a little bit, right? Something like that. And actually we'll put it before the slice transform because you want it to happen to the logo layer and then be moved around. So that looks pretty good to me. Now, we're gonna run into a problem here when we try and cast this content onto the screens. And that problem is, like I said earlier, these screens are actually non-existent in certain spaces. They're actually obscured by this booth here. So first thing let's do is let's go back and let's correct some of what we've done earlier where, where we ignored these before. Let's account for those now because that's gonna cause us some issues. So let's go back to our output transformation. I'm gonna go ahead and clear out everything that we have open just so it's easier to see. So if you're lucky, in your pixel map, they will tell you the size of each panel. If they don't, you can do some basic math and figure it out. This is with 224, I can see that there are 7 panels across, and they will almost always show you how many panels are across. And you can just do some division there and figure out that it's 32 pixels, right? So we know here that this is 32 pixels by 64 pixels. And that means that this right here is 32, 64, 128, right? So we got 128 there, and we have 64 here. So we know how big this little extra chunk is. So let's do this. One easy way for this size, for this particular map, is we can take this guy, we can cut it in half, right? I'll just duplicate it so it's a little bit easier for me. And the width, I know, is gonna be 128. So we'll say 128, boom, and we're gonna drop that right there, and it'll all snap in place. And that is pretty much exactly what we want. Super easy. Now, what we're actually gonna do here is instead of using these 2 separate slices, let's make a polygon. So it's 1 slice, easy to take care of. If you need to do any outline tracers, it's all easy, right? So we're gonna say new with this plus arrow up here, polygon, boom. And yes, it's gonna make us draw it on the input selection. Just draw the shape that you know it is, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, just get it nearby. So boom, 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 boom. Easy. Output transformation, where are you at? There you are. So now that we're here, right, we're gonna hit edit points, and we're on the output side, to be clear. I've gone to the output side, I'm hitting edit points. The great thing about this is these are actually gonna snap to these points for us. So boom, right there. Just start dropping these in all the right places. And last one right here. Easy. Okay, great. Now we go back to our input side. Very important to go back, right? And we're gonna say match output shape again. It's gonna be perfect. And we will go out of edit points, back to transform. And we're just gonna scale that right to where it needs to be. Now you could probably take this and mirror it and then deal with that elsewhere, but it's better practice just to make a separate one and do it correctly, right? So once again, we're gonna add a new shape, new polygon, and we'll draw the same layout that I know it is on this side. And since we don't actually need, what is it right here? This SL guy right anymore, I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna drag it there, and we'll take our SR main, drag it there. So now this is accomplishing what we had before. We will grab our polygon 2, right? Which is over here. And let's just edit the points again. So I'm gonna move that there, there, and put each corner in its place just like that. Great. Now back to our input, and we'll say match output shape, boom, transform, and we'll just go ahead and snap that to where it needs to be, like that. Easy. Now that's great. That looks all exactly how we want it. Let's go ahead and get rid of what we don't need anymore. You may want to keep these, just if you're not sure, you might want to keep them on either a separate screen that's just off to the side, or throw them off in a corner somewhere and just disable the slice. Either way, it's helpful to have sometimes. In this case, I don't think we need it. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete everything that says main, And then we're going to rename this. Again, this is our stage right main, and this is our stage left main. Great. Okay, sweet. Now that is a little bit more clear about where we're at, which is perfect. So let's go ahead and on our output here, we'll get rid of that for now. You can see now that we've done this, the logo is only showing on the rear. So why is that? It's because we got rid of the slices, right? So if we go back to our slice transform, you're gonna see they're in red. SL main and SR main. So let's just go ahead and kill those. We don't need them anymore. We'll go back to our slices and we're gonna grab those new ones. So even though they're the same name, because they're a different slice, technically Resolume will not pick them up. So you gotta make sure you fill these back in. And if you just drop them on the whole stack, it's going to create a second slice transform. You definitely do not want that. So make sure you drop them on top of this slices section. So there we go. Now, yes, we can see that they are misaligned, right? And that is not ideal. So there's a couple ways around that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make something called cheat slices. Now, these are a little unintuitive at first, but once you get the hang of them, they're super helpful and very, it's hard to work without them now, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new screen. We're just gonna rename this cheat. It doesn't really matter. The name is irrelevant, but just so you don't get confused later. And then our slice one here, the output again is irrelevant. All we're worrying about is the input side. Okay, so what we're gonna do with this slice now that we have it is we're actually going to copy the size of this, the slice that we're pulling it from. So the width is 560 and the height is 320. Now we only really need the square center. So I'm just gonna actually copy the 320 and call it 320 by 320, which it perfectly is right now. Look at that, amazing. So we're just gonna making sure that these are where we need them. So drag and drop, it'll snap to sort of the top left corner or along the bottom or whatever. And then let's hold the Alt key, which is gonna let us make changes to both sides of the shape at the same time. And let's drag this out, just like that. Now, just zoom in and make sure that we got that perfect. Again, I'm holding Alt here so I can snap these a little bit closer. Boom, right there. Okay, now why have I done this? The reason is the center of this slice is now at the center of this square, which is where I want it really, because this top left corner, top left from the stage side is not very important. We want to fill it with content, but it's not where we want the content to be centered on. We want the content to center on that square area. So by having this slice the way it is, we cover that entire space and we also center the content where we want it. So we're gonna call this stage right center. Sure, right. Now that looks good. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. We'll call this stage left center. And we're just gonna drag and drop that right there. Great. So with those done, now what we can do is if we go back to our logo here and we once again get rid of our stage left main and stage right main, we'll take these cheat slices and we'll drag and drop those onto that same spot and boom, now they are actually where we want them. And again, let's set this, will fit even work here? Let's see. It helps a little bit, it's not perfect. That is fine. Let's put it all to fill, including our rear, now that everything is a little bit too big, fill. And we should be able to scale this down and get it pretty close. Just like that, yeah. So the bottom one's a little bit small, we can correct that later, but for now, things are looking good, right? So you can see here that if I were to go back to this guy in our output transformation, we have these centered on that square area, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. And also, we don't have everything stretching across all of our columns, right? It's only showing the content where we want it, which is fantastic. Now, similarly, we've gotten the logo line where we want, which is great, but the content is still being stretched across the whole thing, which might be the effect you're looking for, but in this case, I don't think that's really what I want. I'd rather have the content so that it's a little bit smaller, so that more of the resolution gets fit in there, and more of the content space gets fit in there, right? So let's go ahead and do the same slice transform effect to our content layers here. So on layer one, which is what's currently putting up this background here, I'm gonna go ahead and put all of our screens, which is drag and drop the whole screen layer right onto layer one. Boom. So now what it's doing is it's taking all that content and it's stretching it to meet each one, which looks pretty good. Especially, things like this look great for our background, right? I think it works really well. Nothing looks too big or stretched. It actually fits pretty nicely because the whole size of that rectangle is pretty close to 16 by 9. However, if we put something like this up, and again, we drag and drop our whole screen onto that layer. Let me make sure I have that layer selected. Drag and drop screen 1, boom. So now this is okay, but the problem is it's centering this spiral type thing that we got going on, not in the center of the square, which maybe looks okay right now, but if you see it in person, it looks a little off, right? It seems like it should be centered right here, again, where we have the logo centered. So to fix that, we can use our cheat slices. So let's go ahead and go to our layer, get rid of our SL main and SL right. Hello, there we go. And we will drag our cheat slices instead. Boom. So now we have this issue where we're getting our content leaking through the slices because these are alpha-based, this is an alpha-based layer. So we're seeing that content come in behind this, which can actually cause quite a few issues. Good news though, since we're using slice transform, we don't actually need to keep the layout looking like this. It doesn't need to be as we imagine, right? Because we can sort of place things where we want with slice transform. So this is the time where I'm gonna take this opportunity to rearrange the way these screens are laid out a little bit. So I'm gonna grab all of these columns. Let's move them off to the side here. Let's grab these two guys, put them up in our corner. And I'm just gonna, I don't even care if this cheat slice is off of the canvas because it isn't not important, right? I am gonna keep these spaced still, and I'll show you why in a second here. The rear, let's move it down over here. And then all of these guys, let's move them up. So they're, they have somewhere to live. Great. So now that at least gets all of our content so nothing's overlapping, everything looks good. On our output side, we're looking good here. There's a couple things we can still do though, right? Now, I don't necessarily want all these columns to copy the content like this. I don't think that really looks that good. But I also don't want to have the columns, where I had them before spread out so that they get all that content because it causes some issues with our layout, right? So to get that content looking the way I want, we can make some more cheat slices. So let's make a, let's click on cheat and let's make a new screen. And it's gonna by default make 1920 by 1080. Let's leave it like that, that's perfect. And let's scale that down to the size of our columns. So I'm holding shift and I'm dragging the right corner here. And by dragging the right corner, that's gonna keep the aspect ratio. And we'll just go down till the top snaps with those top columns. That looks great. Let's move these guys out of the way. And what I'm gonna do is just sort of space out these columns here. So our 4 is good, our stage right 1 needs to come out over here. Stage right 2, I'm gonna put sort of approximately there. And again, these don't need to be perfect. This is all, this is how it's gonna appear in the club. If you wanna make it perfect, you're more than welcome to, but for this demonstration, I'm not gonna worry about it. So something like that. Looks good to me, right? Cool. And you could, at this point, if you wanted to, take these two columns and actually match them over here because we're gonna span content across this essentially. But it's probably best to keep them separate so that if you wanted to do chasers or whatever, you can. So let's move this rear out of the way. I'm gonna duplicate this guy. We'll put it, we'll just put it right next to the first one, that's fine. And then here is our stage. This is our 2, so here's our number 1. Cool. And you'll notice for both of our 1s, I'm keeping them on the inside. And the reason for that is because those screens I want, they're on either side of the stage, right, towards the audience. So I want to have our 1s up in the front, and I want that content to be like wrapped, that's why I'm doing it that way. And then our 2, I'm just going to estimate is approximately right about there. And that's pretty close. So again, let's rename these. I accidentally made a second screen for them. I did not mean to do that. When I said create a new screen, what I meant was create a new slice, and that will create the 1080p. So here's one thing about Resolume. It will not let you have a screen that doesn't have any slices in it. So I want to get rid of the screen, but I'm gonna need to create a dummy slice first. So first thing, let's go ahead and rename this. We're gonna call this, these are our stage right columns. We'll call this SR column full, sure, right? And we're gonna call this SL column full. And then let's go ahead and go here, new slice. That one we're gonna get rid of. I'm gonna select both of these with the shift key, Control X, click on sheet, Control V, boom, there's our stuff, and we can get rid of screen 2. Awesome. So, all right. Now, again, just to reiterate, the output does not matter. So right now, if we're clicking on our cheat, it's gonna look weird because all of these are taking up that full 1920 by 1080p output. Totally irrelevant, don't worry about it. As soon as you click back on your other screen, it'll all look the way you want. So we're gonna go to our input here, and now these are our stretch, our spanned looks. So for our layer 1, let's go ahead and get rid of all these columns here. And let's drop our new, okay, they got renamed to 2. I'm gonna ignore that, who cares? But that's because we duplicated them or copied them. So I'm gonna take those and we're gonna drag those onto our slice transform here. Boom. And I just realized I did it for the other layer, so let's bring this layer up. Now you can see that our input map is stretching this content across those 2 squares. And because our columns are pulling from those locations on our input side, our output is gonna do what we want, right? So it's no longer taking that content and duplicating the exact same thing to every column. It's actually gonna spread it across. And that will be more obvious once we do it on this side here. Also, one pro tip that I learned recently, you might already know that if you change a parameter in Resolume and right click it, it will reset back to its default parameter. If you right click the slices area, it will just get rid of all those slices, which if you have a lot and you don't want to delete everything, sometimes can be very helpful. So let's drag, once again, SL main, SR main, and rear onto that. And let's also, oh, actually, nope, that's not what I wanted to do. We want our cheat slices for those. So we'll do our entire cheat slice onto that layer. So everything is centered the way we want. And then the rear by itself is all we really need. So I'm gonna drag that as well. Boom. Now rear, we've moved off to the side. So let's just put that, let's put that back. I'll take these, move them over here and put our rear guy in the corner. Great. Yeah, something like that. So now our output actually is looking pretty solid, and it's actually a lot more evident if I bring this guy up now too. You can see that on these columns here that are being stretched apart, we're getting that entire full view of the content being stretched on all of those columns, which is really nice. That's gonna look way better in the nightclub than having everything duplicated, right? Now, on our input side for our cheat slices, we've established the center ones, but sometimes for certain looks, it looks cooler to have it going across the entire output, right? You want people to really feel immersed. So let's make one more cheat slice here where, I'm just gonna, let's just duplicate one of these, it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna call this main stretch, I guess. Cool. And let's take that, I'm gonna match that left side with the left side of our main screen and drag the right side across, boom. And I'm just now noticing I have part of this off the screen, so we're gonna correct that right now. In fact, let's move this out of the way, take these, move it in just a hair, put this back to where our left side was, and now we'll drag this to match right on this guy. Again, polygons are a little weird. They won't always snap correctly, so you might have to zoom way in and try and fix it. And if it overlaps a little bit, totally fine, right? Not a big deal. So there's that. We have our main stretch. So what we can do, let's go to this layer 2 guy. We have our slice transform here. Now you can have 2 slice transforms active at the same time. It will almost always mess it up. And the reason for that is because the slice transform is literally taking the content and positioning it based on the information you're telling it, and then it's leaving it that way. So if you slice transform that next, if you do it again, it's gonna take that previously sliced content and it's gonna take that and transform it to a bunch of different screens. So it'll be like a nested slice transform essentially, which is not good. The only time you can get away with this is if you change your scaling mode to mask, which is just going to, basically cut out the squares that you have and just plop it as if it was full screen, which is useful sometimes, but not for what we're doing now. So I'm gonna go back to fill here. So let's make another slice transform that we are going to bypass, and let's actually do the exact same thing as this. So we're getting all of these same cheat slices and all these same slices like the rear, but except instead of the SL center and SR center, we're gonna use that main stretch. So let's do our main stretch and our columns, drag that right there. Again, it's making that new slice transform for us. And then we'll grab our rear and we will drag that there as well. Now you can see it looks crazy right now, and that's because of what I mentioned. So let's go ahead and bypass this guy. And let's look at our output again here, and we'll bring these up on our screen 1. So looks great, but I think, so just like I was saying before, right? We're keeping these where they are, but maybe we want that second layer to span across everything. So now on this second layer, I'm gonna bypass the first one, and I'm gonna unbypass the second one. And now when I bring this up, you'll see that that's actually spanning across the entire main output, but keeping everything else where we want it, which is really nice. You know, so certain looks, like big spirals, big whatevers like that, it looks really good. And that's, you know, you can have it on both layers. And one tip too is if you were to MIDI map these, right? Control-Shift-M for MIDI map. Hello, Control-Shift-M. You click on it and you would MIDI map it. I'll go ahead and use the key mapping because I don't have a MIDI controller in front of me. You can map both of these, and as one's already bypassed, and what it's gonna do is it's just gonna switch between the two of them, right? So you can see here that as I press this key, which for you is gonna be like a MIDI command, you can see it's swapping between those two slice transforms that we have. Super helpful. If you have more than two, if you have a couple different looks you want to pull from, you're probably going to want to look into some other extensions, things like stage flow, super useful. And that's something I'm not going to go into today, but there's already a great tutorial out there. I will link it in the description if you have stage flow. There's a couple other last minute things I want to show you. The first one is something you will probably encounter at some point in your VJ career, which is where you plug into an output. If you bring all of your outputs to 0 on a LED screen, a lot of the time you'll see that the screen is not actually black, it's a dark gray. And that is a super, super common problem. So I'm gonna show you how to fix that real quick here. Disclaimer, this is only for Windows machines running with an NVIDIA graphics card, which is gonna be most computers, but there's probably something similar if you're running AMD and on a MacBook. I know this can be a little tricky, but there's a solution somewhere. But for Windows computers running on NVIDIA graphics cards, what you wanna do is go to your NVIDIA control panel, which I have pulled up right here. Now, it's a little hidden. You click on change resolution. It's not gonna be any of these other settings, especially not the one that says, where is it, color, right? Desktop color settings, totally irrelevant for this. Believe it or not, it makes no sense. Go to change resolution, select the output you're talking about. I'm gonna use full HD TV for this one, but for you it'll be probably like Novastar or something like that. It looks like there's nothing here that would matter. Scroll down, and this is what's really important. You always wanna change this to NVIDIA color settings and then output to full. Now, if you're on default and it already says full, you can probably ignore this, but to be honest, you probably don't have this problem if that's the case. But if you do, I can almost guarantee you this is set to limited. So make sure you go change that to full. It's gonna help you a lot. So that looks great. Cool, go ahead and apply there. So that'll make your screens flash and your output go crazy, but it'll fix the issue, almost guaranteed. And if it's not, then it's probably a gamma issue on the Novastar side or on the LED wall side. So you might want to talk to your LED tech if you have that issue. But in general, most of the time, that will solve your problem. If you don't see your screen in there, you're outputting probably from your Intel, and then there's some other complications things there. But in general, you probably want to be going out your graphics card output. So overall, this is a pretty solid start to advanced output mapping, and this is sort of what you'd have to do for any sort of pixel mapping situation. But this is just using Resolume's built-in tools here, so I really hope that tutorial is helpful for you. Again, I get this question asked all the time, both on the Resolume forums on Facebook, which you should join if you're not there already, because there's a lot of great people there. And also personally, a lot of my VJ friends are people that are trying to learn how to VJ and have only worked on projectors and don't know how to do this kind of mapping. I get this question all the time here. So I'm hoping that this video covered all those bases, makes it a little bit easy for you to understand what's going on. I'm sure there are gonna be some questions, so go ahead and drop those in the comments below. Or of course, like I said, hit the Resolume forums. There's a lot of people there very willing and ready to help. So anyways, I'm Jason Esguerra. If you like this kind of content, you wanna see more, go ahead and hit subscribe. Throw me a like if you like the video. And if there's something I can do better, please let me know. If I talk too fast, I am aware. You can always slow the video down to 75%. I'm sure it'll help out. Shout out, Gerald Dundun. All right, have a good night and have a great gig.